Hello, guys, and welcome to the next episode of Time to Talk Titanic. I'm joined by the wonderful Aaron from Titanic Artist,
Hello.
and I am the wonderful Louie from Titanic and Other Liners. Today, we're going to be talking about the Carpathia and the Californian.
Or as I like to say, because I like a dramatic flair, a tale of two ships. Because it kind of is. It's just perfect, the drama just writes itself. We've got a ship that hears the distress signal and does everything it can to get there, probably before it should, because it went quicker than it probably should have done. And you've got a ship that's like, nah, bye, I'm out. So,
I had this image of it being modern day, and I'm sat in my flat looking out the window, and it looks like that flat's on fire. But you know what? They haven't contacted me, so surely not. And they're like, them calling their cousins in Birmingham. Hey guys, the flat's on fire. All right, we're on our way. We're on our way. And I'm just sat there watching it burn, thinking, could be a bonfire. Yeah, I think it's a bonfire. I'll just tell Megan. I'll let Megan. Megan, the flat's on fire next door, or they're having a bonfire. Yeah, you're not sure? No. Okay, cool.
it's really bad. And I mean, we'll get into this, but the fact that they did kind of everything in their power to not make contact, but I mean, they used a Morse lamp, they had binoculars, they did speak to their crew for a kind of second opinion or third opinion, but they didn't go and wake up the wireless operator.
No. Also,
you would think that would be the most sensible thing to do.
What I don't understand is if they got one of their officers, I for the life of me don't know the name of the officer, sorry. If they asked the officer to contact them by Morse lamp, why couldn't they have got that person to then go to the Marconi room and try and send out a message without waking up the other guy? Without waking up the Marconi, the wireless operator. Are they different languages? Because as far as I'm aware, Morse lamp and Morse code, they're the same languages, just one's a light and one's a sound. So is it not possible for someone that knows Morse code via the lamp to then go, okay, I'm just going to go down to the Marconi room and tap out a quick message?
That is a very good point. And I wish I knew the answer. It's just a lot of it doesn't make sense. And I think that's what makes it interesting. But I think also it's what makes a lot of adaptations and stuff completely omit it out of any telling of the sinking, because it's so complex and so mystifying, and there's so many layers to it to unravel that sometimes it's better to just not actually discuss it at all.
Yeah.
Because it's just it's bizarre and actually quite depressing, because you've got a ship that's sinking in which nearly 1,500 people die, and then you've also got a ship that could help and is watching this the whole time.
Yeah. Also, bearing in mind that California is completely empty as well, so if they got there, they probably could have been able to take every single person.
Oh yeah, completely.
Obviously, not big. They would have had people on the deck and outside, but they still would have been able to take everyone. And it's not like if they were staying there for the night. They decided, okay, we're going to stop all engines because we're surrounded by ice. We can see that they've got no passengers on. They see the distress rockets. Even if they thought, they don't look like distress rockets. There's a ship out there. It seems to have stopped. Surely there's nothing to stop you from... I mean, I don't know the whole politics between Cunard and White Star at the time with this, but surely you could have just gone a little bit out of your way. You've got no passengers, and you're not going to avoid their schedule. Just see what's going on. Maybe it's not that easy. I'm not a maritime expert. I think neither of us are. We're both Titanic enthusiasts.
So I see what you mean. I mean, Cunard, the Carpathia was a Cunard ship, and it still did everything that it was meant to do, even though they're a rival company. Although, having said that, when they had the survivors, Carpathia was like, we should drop them off.
You know what? I'm completely stupid. I don't know why I said that. Californian's not Cunard at all.
Oh, Californian
it's British Leyland line.
That's the one. So, Carpathia was going to drop them off at, I forget the exact name of the place, but basically somewhere that was not too far away, because it would have cost Cunard less. It was less of a cost to
Are
the
you talking about the
company.
survivors?
The survivors,
Yeah, I
yes.
believe they're going to go Halifax. Was it Halifax they were going to drop them off at?
Somewhere with a Z. It was like a funny sounding place, and probably not far from there. And then you also had the
Azores and Halifax were the closest ports. That's probably what you're thinking. Azores?
yes, that one. Yeah, I knew there was like a Z in it. It sounded like so. It wouldn't matter what company the ship. You would hope anyway.
Yeah.
I'm sure there were probably people that assumed Captain Smith was reckless, and even if they were going to help them, would be like cursing him under their breath. And I think that's a big part of what interests people in the mystery and legacy of Titanic. Because you think, what would I have done
Yeah.
in any kind of position? What would I have done if I was the captain? What would I have done if I was on the Californian or a passenger on the Titanic? And I think that's what keeps it constantly kind of rejuvenating through different generations, is that interest of what would I have done,
Yeah.
not just what happened, because the story of what happened would eventually get old, and it has done. But I think it is that question of putting yourself in that position, of the different people that were at play, that keeps it kind of coming to the forefront every now and again. And that's why I'm excited to talk about this today, because it is a very interesting topic. And I mean, like you say, neither of us are historians, experts. We're both in our early mid-20s.
I'm in my earlier 20s.
Yeah, you're in your earlier 20s. I'm in my 25s. So, but I'm excited to talk about it. I really am, because I've actually learned a lot of really interesting things that I didn't know this time 2 weeks ago.
Definitely. I've got to say, you are going to make me look like a complete amateur when it comes to this episode, I reckon.
How?
The more information I was trying to put into my head with this, the more I was like, okay, this is going to be tricky.
It is one of those things. There is so much to read and that you could learn. And I think you almost have to put on a filter and be like, right, that's superfluous. I don't need that. That's cool, but I don't need it. The main thing I wanted to try and get right was the names of the officers on the Californian, and referencing them, and the captain, of course, who I was talking to my partner about it, because I watched a documentary and a couple of other videos about it when I didn't watch them, I was kind of listening to them. I was in the bath, and I came downstairs all hot and bothered, and I was like, "Rah, rah, rah, rah." And my partner was like, you seem more stressed after your relaxing bath. What's wrong? And I was telling him about the Californian, letting the Titanic sink without helping, as if it just happened yesterday, as if it was some modern tragedy. But then he got really invested because it's super interesting and dramatic.
Oh, yeah.
And he was like, "They did what?" And I was like, "I know." And I was just going on about it. I was so angry, but it's because it's good. I mean, it's horrific, but it's good drama. It's it writes itself. The whole time this is happening, you couldn't make it up. It's insane. And the fact that the young man on Titanic, Jack Phillips, had told him to shut up and work in Cape Race. And then 10 minutes later, once Cyril Evans has gone to his wee bed in the Californian, the Titanic hits an ice. 10 minutes. It's not even it's a day later. It's 10, 15 minutes later, it hits an iceberg. That's just Shakespeare levels of irony and tragedy.
I think that's something we've got to come on to later as well, because did that have a play in what happened? Were they they told shut up?
Maybe they were knocking on Cyril Evans' door, and he was just like, "I can't hear you."
Yeah.
He's just like, "I'm a very deep sleeper."
I am fast asleep.
Yeah. So, I think where we could possibly start is...
Start at the very beginning.
I mean, essentially, yeah. So the very beginning is actually the Californian was built in Dundee, which I like a little Scottish shout out. Whoop whoop. And at the time, it was referred to as a monster and a leviathan. It was huge for the time. I think it was 170 meters long.
Wow. Yeah.
And the boilers were so large that when they were being towed down the street to the ship, in Dundee, it broke through the cement and
Oh
burst
wow.
water mains
Oh my
because
god.
they were so heavy. And then also there were cranes being used to build the ship that hit telephone wires and caused a small explosion. So they should have just known from there that the Californian was cursed.
Yep.
And, there were lots of things, the SS New York was trying to warn Titanic, the Californian was trying to warn the people building it. Like, people should have just known with these ships.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think we should just call it a day and stop building it. But
Juju.
bad juju. But yeah, it was built in Dundee, and it had a fairly normal life until that morning. And funnily enough, they only had their Marconi system installed into a refitted cabin in early 1912. So the wireless system had only been in operation, and Cyril Evans had only been employed for a few months before
Yeah.
this.
Which
So
would mean he doesn't have as good a rapport with the rest of the crew.
Yep, so he's potentially even viewed as a bit of an outsider. They don't quite, myself, I've worked in supermarkets which are very traditional, and I've gone in working for the online aspect of the company.
Yeah.
And people, they don't get it, they don't want to help out, they don't want to get trained on it. And when you're explaining the importance of it, they don't get it because
Yeah.
it's not what they
It's
understand.
not what they know. No, it's change.
So it could potentially be why they didn't go and wake up Cyril Evans. There was possibly, you might be right, a bit of, we don't need him, we can figure this out for ourselves.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, they couldn't and they didn't. So let that be a lesson to you. Ask for help.
Yeah. Ask for help. Don't be shy. Come on.
Exactly. But yeah, I think that's a really good point. So it was fairly new technology, to be fair. But the Californian had it. They had the technology at their disposal. Of course, they only had one wireless operator working. So when he clocked off at around 11:30,
Yeah.
that was that.
Yeah.
He was in bed. They could have woke him up. They didn't. Whereas Titanic, obviously, as we all know, had the young Jack Phillips and Harold Bride.
24-hour watch. Yeah.
24-hour watch, who were very harassed, I would say, very
Yeah.
very busy.
Oh yeah, very busy with personal work, personal jobs going on. And I think I can understand why they would be angry about getting this final ice warning. It's come through while they're in the middle of sending a message. It's something which I don't understand why the wireless operator interrupted. What's the wireless operator of the Californian?
Cyril Evans.
Yeah, so he'd interrupted a message midway, which is just something that's a bit like, why have you done this? So you can understand the frustration, especially when the wireless operators on the Titanic had such a heavy workload.
Yeah, and also Cyril Evans didn't put MSG at the start of the message, which basically is code for take this to the bridge.
Yeah.
He didn't put that, therefore Jack Phillips didn't feel the need to do that. He, of course, felt the need to infamously say, shut up, I'm working Cape Race.
Yeah.
And earlier, so on the 14th of April, at about 6:30, 7 o'clock, Cyril Evans had sent a message to Titanic and other liners.
Oh, there we go.
In the area, shameless plug, saying that he had spotted, but that his team had spotted, 3 large bergs to the south of the Californian.
Yeah.
And he sent a message which had the beginning of the message was MSG. And Harold Bride was on shift on the 14th of April at about 6 o'clock at that time, and he took that message to the bridge. So the bridge knew, the Californian, which is, within this radius, has seen 3 large bergs to the south of us. We'll keep an eye out. Awesome, thanks. So Harold went away. So you can tell that Cyril Evans is very, particular about his job and is being very cautious.
Yeah.
But on a small freight ship, you're probably going to be a bit more cautious than you're going to be on a ship like Titanic, which has so much kind of pomp and circumstance and, has almost been, I don't think many of the crew were calling it unsinkable because they're all smart men who know ships and know that they're not invincible. but there's a lot more confidence instilled on the crew of the Titanic than on the crew of the Californian. And I think Cyril Evans was maybe being a little bit paranoid.
Possible. A bit intimidated, I think.
But I mean, even if he put MSG on the last message at 11:30, would Jack Phillips have left his busy workload to go and give that to the bridge? And would the bridge have done anything differently?
I think they would have. I think they would have.
They had a message from 5 hours earlier, basically saying the same thing. So I think the bridge would have received a message from the Californian saying they've stopped, and they'd have thought, good for them. They've stopped.
See, I disagree. I think they would have taken that seriously. I think you've got such an experienced crew on board. So I believe they would have taken that seriously. I think they would have told the captain, because Smith famously said to them, "If anything changes, let me know." I think that's one of the things.
That's nothing really changing for them, though.
It's not a change, but it's got to a point where the ice is so bad that a ship has had to stop, and this ship is not far away from them. I truly believe if that last message has got through, they would have gone, okay, here's another one. They're this far away. We need to stop.
And they've had to stop. It's an interesting one to think about, and it's 3 little letters at the start of a message could have potentially caused the Titanic to stop. And it wouldn't have been for long. It would have only been for 5 or 6 hours until the sun started to rise.
Yeah.
And they were making such good time anyway that would have really impacted their arrival in New York at all. So, God damn it, Cyril Evans, MSG. God damn MSG. I think it was just a very last minute thing to ships in the area. If he wanted it to have an impact like it should have, and if he wanted them to take it seriously, or for it to go to the people that have the power to stop a ship, then he should have put that. So it's all these little things that lead to such a big event like the sinking of the Titanic. Which is really unfortunate.
Yeah.
As we'd said, that message was sent out to Jack Phillips at around 23:30, and he gets a rude response. Cyril Evans turns off everything and goes to bed. And at around, I think it was 11:10, so about 20 minutes before this, the third officer, Charles Groves, had seen lights. And he had said to the captain, and he was like, cool, thanks for letting me know. And it's Captain Stanley Lord. When I was talking to my partner, I was saying Walter Lord, and then I stopped, and Paul was like, what is it? And I was like, it's not Walter Lord, it's Stanley Lord. But you can see when I was getting mixed up. And I stopped mid-sentence, and I think Paul thought I was having an epiphany, and I was. But so Captain Stanley Lord had been told by his third officer, Charles Groves, that he'd seen lights at about 11:10, from what they thought was a small steamer.
Yeah.
And they'd said that the way that the lights were moving on this ship, they thought that they were using oil burning lamps, because the lights seemed to have a peculiar kind of wavering to them. So they didn't think personally that it was a large luxury liner.
Yeah. Which, him saying that sort of goes to prove the whole thing with there being a haze, not a haze, a sort of optical illusion, which is why they didn't see the iceberg as quick.
Completely. Yep. There is so much this night that lends credence to the Coldwater Mirage. And actually, it might be a good time to talk about the Coldwater Mirage, because I think if ever there was a good point to talk about it, it would be now.
Yeah.
In your opinion, do you think that the Coldwater Mirage is a thing that exists? Because there are many people that think it's a load of BS. And do you think it was something that was at play that night?
100%. Yeah, definitely. No doubt about it. Yeah, I do. Yeah. That's my answer. Yeah, I do. I don't see there being doubt for it. There's scientific proof.
Yeah, there is definite evidence from scientists that it's a thing that exists, and we're basically, you know, there's hot air, there's cold air, there's hot water, there's cold water.
It completely explains why they would have seen the iceberg so late. Because if they're scanning the horizon constantly, there's no way they would have missed that on the horizon. You know, it's a black object that's blocking out stars on the horizon. They were trained to see stuff like that, you know, with or without binoculars. And side note, I don't think the binoculars would have helped. I think they would have hindered. But we can get into that another time. So, you know, you could see it on the horizon. If you've got that mirage, you're not going to see it until it's a lot closer. So I think that you know, I think that's enough proof in itself that there was that phenomenon that happened that night.
Exactly. Because what you're looking at when you're looking at a mirage, you think you're looking at the horizon, but actually you're looking at something that's above the horizon. You're looking at a false horizon.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at, you know, if you're in a desert and there's a gravel road in front of you, and it's quite a long road, and there's a black Jeep that's driving up a bump way ahead of you, it's just going to look like a black disc floating in midair until the tires get over the road. And then it's going to be apparent that it's a car. But for a while, it's just going to be a black blob in the middle of the sky on the horizon. So what you're looking at until a point is false. And like you said, for the iceberg, they're looking at a horizon that is false. Potentially, we weren't there, they weren't our eyes, but there's very strong evidence from meteorologists and all that to say that it's a thing. And the same can be said potentially for the Californian. They're looking at lights that a lot of them, not all of the crew, but most of them are adamant it's a tramp steamer. So just a small ship, not a luxury liner like the Titanic. Even though Captain Lord had gone to Evans and had said to him, you know, what ships are in the area, and Evans had said that the only ship in the area was the Titanic. So to them, you know, this is a small ship that is so insignificant that no one's even aware of its presence. And the reason for that could potentially be that they can only see the top row of lights. So they can only see maybe the A deck promenade and the boat deck lights, or maybe at most they can see the boat deck lights.
But then to throw a spanner in the works here, to counter argue that, people on the Titanic said they saw a ship clearly, and if the Mirage was going to just the heights where they could only see A deck or B deck or A deck and boat deck, then surely Titanic passengers would only have seen, I don't know, not even that, they would have seen the mast lights and maybe part of the boat deck.
Yeah, that's what is so unusual. You would think if one ship can see hardly anything, that the other ship would also be in that same predicament. But that doesn't really seem to be the case.
No.
And in 1962, funnily enough, Officer Boxhall told the BBC that he was able to see the portholes on the ship that he was looking at from the Titanic. So if he was able to see the portholes, then you would think that the cold water mirage wasn't a thing. However, with the temperatures fluctuating, I suppose it would have to be certain temperatures for it to be a consistent kind of event going on. So if the temperatures vary enough, you might have small passages of time where the temperatures have varied enough for an image to come through fully, and then for an image to be blocked off again. So it might be quite intermittent. And that would be actually proven with some survivor testimony or eyewitness testimony. So the first bit of eyewitness testimony I want to read out, because I think it's important to hear in their own words what they were seeing. And what was said during the inquiries, because, you know, it's one thing listening to a 20-something-year-old and an aging 25-year-old.
Aging. Let's not forget that bit.
Totally aging. I found a grey beard hair, actually, a week ago.
I've been getting grey hairs for at least over a year now. Not fully, but like, the odd straggler in my hair, in my sideburns.
It's what happens. Before we know it, we'll both be going as Captain Smith for Halloween.
Oh yeah.
But,
Well, it's what happens when you get engaged.
So in the inquiry, Captain Stanley Lord, not Captain Walter Lord,
No.
of the Californian, said, "She came in late at 11:30, alongside of us until, I suppose, 1/4 past, within 4 miles of us." Now that's important, hold on to that, 4 miles of us.
Holding it.
We could see everything on her quite distinctly, see her lights. We signalled her at 11:30 with the Morse lamp. She did not take the slightest notice of it. That was between 11:30 and 20 minutes to 12. So the collision happened at that time. So they were actually Morse lamping this ship before the collision had even happened.
Yeah.
About 10 minutes before it had even happened. And that was potentially because, the ship that they were looking at, it seemed to be kind of coming towards them. So they were possibly warning it. They were maybe just, flashing the lights to say that they had stopped.
Yeah.
Again, you think that they'd wake up Cyril to say that, but they didn't.
Cyril?
So then he says, "We signalled her again at 10 minutes past 12, 12:30, 1:45. We have a very powerful Morse lamp. I suppose you can see that about 10 miles, and she was about 4 miles off, and she did not take the slightest notice of it." So he's saying that they were using the lamp, and that she didn't take the slightest notice of it. But we have, and I mean, I think this adds credence to the Cold Water Mirage, but also adds credence to it. It doesn't completely put in the clear the crew of the Californian, but it does show that there was confusion at what they were looking at. They weren't entirely clear of what was happening.
Yeah.
So you've got Stanley Lord saying, "We Morse lamped the ship. It didn't reply, and as we know, he went to the chart room and he was asleep." Boxhall says, "Captain Smith was standing by my side, and we both came to the conclusion that she was close enough to be signalled by the Morse lamp. So I signalled to her. I called her up and got no answer. The captain said, 'Tell him to come at once. We are sinking.' So I sent that signal out. 'Come at once. We are sinking.' And you kept firing up those rockets." "Yes, then leaving off and firing rockets. There were a lot of stewards and men standing around the bridge, and around the boat deck. Of course there were quite a lot of them, quite interested in this ship, looking from the bridge, and some said she had shown a light in reply, but I never saw it. I even got the quartermaster who was working around with me, I do not know who he was, to fire off the distress signal, and I got him to also signal with the Morse lamp." So there you've got Boxhall saying that they were, using the Morse lamp, and that they got no response. And you've got the Californians captain saying that they were using the Morse lamp and they got no response.
Yeah.
But you've also got Captain Lord saying, they were about 4 miles away, and the light was so strong that it could go about 10 miles.
Yeah.
And yet they didn't seem to be responding. But Boxhall is adamant that he and Captain Smith and many other men were using this light. And some passengers on Titanic were saying, "Oh, I can see a light," but Boxhall says that he never saw a light. So that just shows, and even the fact that some people say they can see it, and Boxhall says he can, is it eyesight? I'm very nearsighted, so if I'm looking out at something like that, I might be one of the people that can. Someone with very powerful vision that doesn't need glasses or contact lenses could potentially see a small flicker on the horizon.
Yeah.
But I think that's just so interesting that the testimony there, you've got Captain Lord saying, "We used the lamp, we got no response," and Boxhall saying the exact same thing.
Yeah. Which I think just it goes to show that there was something that was stopping them from seeing each other's messages, and I can't think of anything else apart from the Cold Water Mirage that would have caused something like that.
Exactly, and on such a clear night, okay, there was no moon, so it was even darker than it would normally have been, which is perfect for using a Morse lamp.
Yeah.
I can't think, and it's a calm sea, it's just the conditions, there's no fog, it is perfect for using a Morse lamp, and yet there is so much confusion, which potentially could be why they didn't think they were looking at the Titanic. However, the one thing we've not really touched on yet are the rockets. You know, the rockets are completely undeniable.
Yeah.
You know, they knew that they were looking at rockets.
Yeah, they said they were counting rockets.
Yeah, exactly. So, Second Officer Herbert Stone, he took over the watch after midnight from Third Officer Charles Grove. And there was an apprentice officer on the ship, James Gibson, and he and Second Officer Stone were standing on the Californian's deck. And
on the Californians, what?
Deck. Does that sound like I said dick?
Yep.
Deck.
Yes, it does. And my 12-year-old brain went, funny.
There was something else in the last podcast. What was it was said? And you were like, I can't remember what it was.
I don't want to talk about it. Poop deck.
That's what it was.
Anyway.
Poop deck.
Anyway.
And deck. There you go. Ooh, poop deck. Anyway, and I know. So, Apprentice Officer James Gibson says that at 5-1, Second Officer Stone tells him that he has observed 5 white rockets. And they would then later count 8.
Yeah.
So they weren't confused about that. They were possibly confused about what kind of ship they were looking at, but they were not confused about the rockets. So I can't, for the life of me, think why they thought it was okay to do absolutely nothing.
Yeah. There's no other reason why a ship would fire rockets at sea. The only rockets they had were distress rockets.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was different for their line, for their shipping line, but why else would someone be firing rockets? What's getting angry?
There's no good reason. It's so, as we see in A Night to Remember,
brilliant film.
The officer goes and shouts down that very cool tube that goes down through the ship, and it goes into the chart room where Captain Lord is. And so that's him addressing him. And this was done kind of periodically throughout a section of time until obviously the captain was asleep.
Yeah.
And he asks what colours they are, and he's told that they're white. And so he kind of assumes, well, you know, they could be company signals. But again, like you said, why would a ship be firing rockets? Even let's say the Olympic was passing the Titanic, and the Titanic's crew are like, oh, there's their sister. Oh, that's cool. Let's send a wee few rockets to say hi. No, because then you're going to have a bunch of first class passengers that are like, excuse me, why the fuck are you firing rockets at 2 a.m?
Yeah.
Like, we've got a dog show tomorrow on the boat deck and I want to look my best. Like, you wouldn't do that. You just wouldn't send up rockets at 1, 2 a.m. It just wouldn't happen. It would not happen.
But then again, the Californian had no passengers on board. So they could have thought, oh, it's another ship with no passengers firing rockets. But still, why would you assume that?
Yeah. Like, that's the thing with the Californian. You have to do a lot of kind of mental gymnastics sometimes.
Yeah.
To almost excuse their absolute shortcomings. And I can understand, you know, even if, let's say, Stanley Lord knew in his heart of hearts that there was potentially a ship sinking, but he also knew that he had his own ship to look after and that he was surrounded by ice.
Yeah.
And he didn't want to risk sinking his ship. That's a very logical fear. That's very understandable. I can sympathise with that greatly. But to not even make an effort, and remember I told you to hold on to the 4 miles thing?
Yes. Didn't he lie about that and say, actually, I think it was about 20 miles?
Exactly.
Is that what you're about to come on to?
So he said in the inquiry 4 miles, but he'd said in a written statement 19 miles. So he kept fluctuating the distance. It's absurd. It's complete, and there were no repercussions. You know, the inquiry, the conclusion was that basically the Californian could have gone to help those that had survived, if not save all of the lives on board that ship. And because the scrapbook went missing, which is when you're getting Morse messages or any kind of messages on a ship back in that day, you would write in a scrapbook things like coordinates. So like the Carpathia would have quickly written down in their scrapbook when the Titanic told them their location. And then they would have transferred that into a very neat and tidy book the next day or at some point. So it can be read if it ever needs to be read, which of course it did have to be read. But the Californian miraculously lost their scrapbook. So there's no way of actually proving that they were any distance from the Titanic. You don't know. For all they know, they could have been on the other side of the freaking world. Yeah. Like, it's just it's a complete failing of just everything that could be failed at. It's a complete, like, for the captain himself to say, you know, I observed the ship and she was about 4 miles away, and then to say in his written sworn statement that it was about 19 miles away is just absurd. It's absolutely insane. But it would, you would lie about that because, so you're writing in your book, we were 19 miles away from Titanic, but the ship I was looking at was 4 miles away. So it's a very convenient lie.
Yeah.
But there's no way of proving it's a lie. But it sounds like a lie because you keep changing what you're saying. Yeah. And I'm sorry, but there's no way that a random ship's, like we've said, is going to be firing rockets at that time.
Not at all. It is ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. And especially because I think it was about 3:40, Officer Stone and Apprentice Gibson, they spotted rockets to the south. And so they said, at this time we spotted rockets to the south.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, the Carpathia was at the south at that time, firing rockets for the survivors to know their location. So they're able to see rockets at X time, at X location, and it corroborates with the Carpathia's location and what they were doing at that time.
Yeah.
But when they're seeing rockets at this location at this time, that's got nothing to do with Titanic.
Nothing. No.
Yeah, that's just a tramp steamer that's having a party at 2 a.m. Like that. Don't worry about that. But these rockets that we saw at 3:40 in the south, they were the Carpathia. But that other thing, that was something else.
How did in their right mind? How did they go? Well, this makes sense to this, and this makes sense to this. So
yeah, exactly. So I think it's shocking that they are able to be like, we saw the Carpathia, but we didn't see the Titanic.
Yeah,
like that's just. But to be fair, they didn't all say that. There were officers that testified, and they didn't say I was looking at the Titanic because they had pressure coming from their captain.
Yeah.
There was a lot of pressure. But there were ones that did say, I do feel strongly that it very well could have been probably most definitely the Titanic.
Yeah.
Like they basically said that they watched the Titanic sink, which must be a horrible feeling.
Oh, absolutely. You've got that great shame that comes with that, I reckon.
Yeah, completely. That is really sad.
But then at the same time, captain is God on board a ship. Your captain tells you no, that's it. Who are you to say, sir, I really think we need to have a look at this? He said no, that's that.
And so the Californian, Cyril Evans had only been offline for 45 minutes when the first distress signals were heard.
Mm-hmm.
Because at 12:15 you had La Provence, Mount Temple, and the wireless station at Cape Race all heard the first distress signals from Titanic.
Yeah.
So at 12:15, you've got 3 stations are picking up. Well, 2 ships, 1 station are picking up the Titanic's distress call.
Yeah, he could well have still been awake.
He could have been awake. It had only been 45 minutes, and I'm sorry, even if he was in the best sleep of his life, I'd have been like dragging him out of bed. The Carpathia's officer, the wireless operator, he ran into the captain's room. Because he was so alarmed, he was so shocked.
He ran to he actually ran to the officers on watch, and they sort of laughed him off and said, as soon as I said Titanic, he went, no, it's not. Then he ran down to tell the captain and was actually chased and told, stop messing around. You're being ridiculous. And then it was Captain Rostron who went, are you sure? Okay, let's do something.
Yeah, he did what a captain should do, because the alternative is you do nothing and you're a coward, essentially. Yeah. And that was very much the mindset of that time. And Stanley Lord had to deal with that for the rest of his life, being called a coward and essentially being responsible in judgment from a court for the deaths of nearly 1,500 people.
Yeah.
Which is just horrific. Absolutely horrific. And the fact that at 10:30, he had said that he saw lights in the east.
Yeah.
Asked Evans, and Evans said the only ship in the area is Titanic. So he's got, his guy that knows, what ships are nearby, and he's in communication with them. And he says, oh, it's, 10:30, what are those lights? And Evans is like, oh, well, I mean, the only ship is the Titanic.
Yeah.
And yet he still doesn't care when he's being told there's a ship, its lights look queer, as they said. He still doesn't care. He's been told the only ship in the area is Titanic.
Yeah.
And we're looking at a ship, you've seen it yourself, and it looks queer, it's firing rockets, and he does nothing. It makes me feel like quite angry.
Yeah.
It's just like totally inexcusable.
There is no excuse for it. Obviously we weren't there. We can't say, we can't give a definitive answer. No one can. The only people that really know what happens are the people that are there, and they're unfortunately long gone. That's just how time works. It's hard to put yourself in that situation and try and imagine exactly what happened when there's so many conflicting stories.
Yeah, completely. Do you think that the Titanic was intentionally ignored?
I think it's hard to say. I'd like to think not. I'd like to say no. But I don't know. Maybe. It's possible. I'm not saying it's not true that they were ignored, but it's possible. What about you?
In a way, I kind of do. Because even if it wasn't intentional, they're still ignoring. I mean, they said in the inquiry, I took that Stone became very defensive, because they kind of got him in a corner.
Yeah.
To the point where he kind of began by saying, I didn't take them to be distress rockets. And he's been pushed, and they're pushing him, and they're pushing him. So he goes from saying, I didn't take it as distress rockets to, they clearly were distress rockets, but what could we do?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's not good. That's bad. What could you do? What you could have done is exactly what the Carpathia could have done.
Exactly what the Carpathia did.
Yeah. So again, the scrapbook's missing. Forever will make me mad. But you've got Third Officer Groves on the Californian says that the ship he was watching was 10 to 12 miles away. You've got Second Officer Stone says that the ship was 5 miles away. You've got the captain saying that the Titanic was 19 miles away, but the ship he was looking at was 4 miles away. It's okay, that's fine. So let's say it's between 10 and 4 miles. Fair enough. It's between 10 and 4 miles. I'll take your word for that. The Carpathia was 58 miles away from Titanic. 58 miles. And that took 4 hours to get there.
Yeah.
So the Carpathia is 58 miles away from Titanic. Takes 4 hours to arrive at the scene. It has a top speed of 15 knots, and they turn off all their heating, all the hot water.
Yep.
They redirect every single bit of energy they've got to the boilers and the speed of the ship, and it makes 17.5 knots.
Yeah.
Avoiding ice the entire time for 2 hours. They're like dodging in and out of icebergs, and they made it there in 4 hours. So you're telling me that a ship that's nearly 60 miles away gets there in 4 hours, but a ship that was 10 or 4 miles away couldn't? Because I've had people in comments saying to me, there was nothing they could have done. There was nothing the Californian could have done. And I'm sorry, it's bullshit. Because even if they were 19 miles away, That is 1/3 of the distance that the Carpathia was.
To say there's nothing they could have done is ridiculous, because lifeboats are intended to be ferries. They're not intended to be boats for people to stay in long term. So
Yes.
they would have ferried to the Californian. People would have climbed out, back to the Titanic, lifted back up on the davits, because the davits had the electric winches. If you don't know what the electric winches are, it's the sort of green box that you see the little girl hiding in the 1997 movie. Not hiding next to. They were electric winches, so they could pull the lifeboats back up without having to heave ho them. So they would have pulled the lifeboats back up and kept transferring. So there is something that they could have done.
Yeah, and as we've said, there were no passengers on the Californian. The Carpathia had, I think it was like 740.
Mm-hmm.
It was, it had a pretty big amount of passengers, to the point where the survivors had to be sleeping on, floors and tables and chairs in like dining rooms and libraries, and they tried their best to accommodate this extra onload of people that, of course, they were not expecting. But actually, I didn't know until recently that there's a very famous painting of the Carpathia picking up survivors. It's a gorgeous painting. It's quite like impressionistic.
Okay.
And it was by an artist who was on the Carpathia, and it's quite an old painting. Like, I've seen it quite a few times when I've been, on the internet looking at different things about the Titanic. So it was painted by a guy called Colin Campbell Cooper.
Okay.
But he was on the ship, and he and his wife Emma helped, bring people on board.
Yeah.
And comfort them and make them coffee.
Yeah.
And
I'm just having a look at the picture now. It's a great picture. It looks like it's the one that Ken Marshall must have based his drawing on. Like, it's the same angle, the lifeboat going towards the ship, and
yep. And then also James Cameron has inspired his from Ken Marshall's painting, because they're almost like storyboard and finished product. Like Ken Marshall's and James Cameron's, they're like almost mirror images. But the fact that this painting that I've been seeing for, the last 15 years was painted by a man who was on the Carpathia, and when all of a sudden their journey to Austria-Hungary was cut short, because of this horrible tragedy and disaster that happened, is just it's incredible. But the Carpathia, I mean, what are your thoughts on the kind of rescue operation that went on?
Oh, it was almost militant. They arrived there. I think they arrived. It took them 3.5 hours in total. So, by the time the ship's gone down, it was what they were waiting, maybe two hours to get there, and then they collected over 700 people in 4.5 hours from tiny little lifeboats through a single ladder and a nest. Is brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. The fact that the captain had the idea. I mean, obviously, I'm not an ocean liner captain. I don't know how common it would be, but the fact that he, cut off the hot water and the heating just to get that extra fuel. He got extra lookouts on shift to look out for everything. He got the stokers down in the boiler room to work extra shifts or to get people in to load more coal in. It was like a military operation.
And the fact that they got Molly Brown to present him with the silver trophy and the gold medal,
the cup,
it's just fantastic. Like, that's just a little cherry on top. And I bet she was really happy to do that, because they'd all been through just a horrific. I can't even imagine. I mean, seeing someone in pain, is horrible. Like, seeing someone, even that you don't know, that's hurting, is not nice, especially when there's nothing you can do. So to be sailing away in a little boat in the pitch black from the place that you've called home for 4 days and 4 nights, and there are people dying, and you can hear them all dying, and it eventually goes quiet, and so you've listened to all these lives being extinguished. That is just so I can't even put into words
No.
how that makes me feel thinking about that. So for her, being the strong figure that she was,
Mm-hmm.
and what she'd been through, to be presenting this man who, when they saw the Carpathia, that must have just been the most incredible thing
Yeah,
ever.
many people thought that they were going to be out there for days, just floating
Yeah.
around in little lifeboats.
In fact, funnily enough, many people thought they were looking at the Olympic,
Yeah,
because before they'd left the Titanic, they had obviously heard word. It could have been just gossip, like, oh, the Olympic's fast, and she'll
yeah.
save us 'cause she's in the area. But the Olympic was actually aware of the sinking and was
Mm.
actually heading to the site.
Yeah,
Um,
Bruce Ismay called it off, didn't he? He thought it'd be too traumatic.
so yeah, the Carpathia was going to um, pass through that area, and pass the Olympic, on a particular route. But you're right, Ismay was like, that would be really horrific because
Yeah,
the ships are near identical. That'd be horrible. That'd be really horrible. And even for the Olympic, for the passengers on the Olympic who want to feel that they're safe, to
mm.
pass a ship that is dotted with widows and orphans because of the ship, that's just like that would be really tragic. And actually, after the sinking of Titanic, there was a strike, in essence. Staff and crew on the Olympic
Yeah.
refused to go
Until they got
on the
lifeboats
next
on.
journey until there were more lifeboats. And then the lifeboats they put on were old, and a lot of them were canvas and they had holes in them.
Yeah,
And they were like, really? Like, this
yeah.
this is what you think's acceptable? But it just shows how quick the reaction was.
Hmm.
Because if everyone knew the reason so many people had died. And like you say, lifeboats are meant to be ferry vessels. They're not meant to be things to stay in.
Yeah.
Um,
They're called lifeboats, but they're not intended to, be
for
life.
living on.
Yeah,
No, no. And Charles Joffin, and his crew in the kitchens were supposed to put food and provisions in the lifeboats, and it
mm.
wasn't until they were being lowered that the survivors saw, there's nothing in here. There's no bread. There's nothing
Mm.
to
I believe,
sustain.
was it not all put in one boat accidentally? Or am I making that up?
Oh, I've not come across that. I've not heard that. It could be true.
Hmm. I have a slight feeling about that.
I wouldn't be shocked. But I mean, there was probably no, great sense of urgency. The fact that a lifeboat drill was actually intended to take place during the afternoon of April 15th,
Yeah.
just a very quick kind of once over,
Well,
shows,
it was meant to be the 14th, wasn't it? And then they pushed it. They postponed it.
yeah, which shows the lackadaisical kind of attitude towards that kind of thing. And whether that was on every ship or just the Titanic, I've not looked into the mental attitudes of other ships to know 100%. But I,
Mm.
I do think that they were just very complacent, a lot of them, because they were on such a big brand new ship. And of course, no one would think that what happened was going to happen.
Yeah.
Um, but I just think the Carpathia, it's what it did, and the fact it was able to do it in the time that it did, and the fact it didn't sink. The crew down below could hear ice scraping on the side of the hull,
Yeah.
and it didn't sink. And it would have been horrific if it had.
Hmm.
And Harold Cotton, the operator on the Carpathia,
Hmm.
for doing his job, just for doing his job. I just think if he had been asleep, what
Yeah.
would have happened? You know,
Yeah. Or if he hadn't persisted, he's gone up to the officers on the bridge and said, "This has happened," and they've gone, "No, it hasn't." If he'd gone, "All right, well, I told them. They didn't believe me. I'm going to bed."
everyone did their job and everyone did exactly what they were meant to do. And then all the passengers on the Carpathia who were headed to Europe got all these survivors on, and they just tried to help in any way they could. And there
Yeah.
was, money was raised before they'd even got to New York,
Hmm.
um, for the survivors, which is what you would do.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it's what you would
It's what
do.
happens now. There's a crisis, and they send crisis, like they send aid to other countries.
Exactly.
These were just the passengers doing it by themselves.
Yeah, just off their own backs. It must have just been so horrible. And, spaces on the ship that you were enjoying, the day before are now covered with, sobbing, cold, some potentially even dead people.
Yeah.
Because not everyone who made it on the Carpathia survived.
Mm.
Due to a lot of reasons. It's really sad, but Captain Arthur Rostron, Operator Harold Cottam, and everyone on the Carpathia 100% deserves the credit that they get
Yeah.
and that they continue to receive to this day, because they did an amazing job. And
Yeah.
it must have been so scary to be adrift on even on a calm sea.
Yeah.
That must have been really scary to a lot of people. I mean,
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of the women in these boats wouldn't have even driven cars,
Hmm.
let alone been on a boat in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah. Definitely not. It would have been something that was incomprehensible, And I guess they're lucky that the weather was as calm as it was. That the weather may have been the reason that the ship hit the iceberg, one of the reasons, but it was also one of the reasons that so many people did survive, because when they were in the lifeboats, they were sat calmly in the sea. They weren't being thrown about.
Yeah, completely.
Well, I think it's important to also note, if we start at the beginning with the ships, and to start with the end, to finish with the end of the ships, that being in 1915, 9th of November 1915, the Californian sank,
Mhm.
and the wreck is still undiscovered. Though it sank, I believe it's only about 100 miles away from where the Britannic eventually sank as well. And also the Carpathia. The Carpathia was hit with 3 torpedoes and took 2.5 hours to sink. When you think about that versus the Lusitania that sank in 18 minutes after 1 torpedo.
Exactly.
So yeah, the Carpathia, 15th of July 1918, hit by 3 torpedoes, sunk in 2.5 hours, and 218 people survived out of the 223 on board. And I believe all the deaths were from impact of the torpedo.
Yeah.
So both ships had a sad end.
They did. It was really just Olympic that managed to hobble on
Yeah.
after that. What day in July was it the Carpathia sank again? You said
15th of July.
15th. I've got the 17th here.
Oh, hold on. Hold on. Old friend Google. Maiden voyage. Thinking 15th of July 1918.
That's weird. On Wikipedia, it's saying the 17th, and because the reason it stuck was because it's the day after my birthday, because my birthday's the 16th, so I was like, oh, it's like the day after my birthday. So just when you said that, I thought, was it the day before?
You know what? No, it was the 17th. You're right. She departed Liverpool on the 15th. So, on that note, it's time to end the podcast. I'm never going to show my face around here again. I've been Titanic and Other Liners. He has been Titanic Carpathia. Thank you for listening, and I'm gone.
I was like, I just want to know if it's the day before or after my birthday, so that like on that day I can play like a little sad trumpet like out the window, and Paul can just be like really embarrassed, like ignore him.
I'll be embarrassed for you
They'll be like,
as
yeah,
well.
but Aaron's hysterical. Don't worry about it. It's something to do with a boat. To be fair, that's most of the time when I'm like ranting and raving about something, he's probably like, it's about a boat. It's fine. Most of the time, it's about a boat.
It was over 100 years ago. So,
it's been 100 years, and I can still taste the sweet, sweet taste of revenge.
I thought you were going to say it's been over 100 years, and I can still smell the fresh paint.
Nope, I can still smell the sweet, sweet taste of revenge. If I had Captain Stanley Lord in this room right now, I'd be like, here's a gin, I'm going to pour myself one, and you and I are going to have a chat. And he'd be like, shit, I've got a very angry gay man about to interrogate me. I'm screwed. But it's 2020, and to be fair, if he was in the room, he'd either be a skeleton or a ghost, and I'd be too scared to speak to him, so it wouldn't happen.
That is very true. That is true.
These are truths. So, thank you everyone for listening. I hope that this was informative. I hope that you've learned maybe one or two little things.
Thank you, Aaron, for carrying this entire episode while I just sat there going,
I don't think that's true.
oh, you're just saying that.
That's not true. Even if all you learned was that the Californian destroyed Dundonian roads and telephone wires on its inception.
Dundonian? Is that what they're called down in Dundee? Dundee.
Aberdeen is Aberdonian, and if you're from Dundee, you're Dundonian.
I guess it makes sense. I'm from London, so I'm a Londoner. What you?
If it's not, then I've just made that up, and I actually want to know now.